Imagine surviving for 28 weeks while the infected around Britain starved out, then getting moved into District 1, a fenced security zone with working lights, food service, and soldiers patrolling the perimeter. Everything about it is designed to feel like the crisis is over, but what it actually is one of the most efficient containment traps ever built in zombie media. When a virus can turn someone in literal seconds, concentrating civilians inside a controlled residential zone doesn't protect them. It just makes them easier to contain once the virus starts tearing through the population again. So today I'm dropping you inside the wire as an ordinary civilian, because the only way to understand what District 1 actually was is to understand it from the inside, at ground level, in real time. From there, we're going to find out the exact moment the military mission stopped being about recovery and started being about extermination. Now, to understand exactly what went wrong, we have to start with the map of London. District 1 worked as a security and reconstruction zone because it was located on the Isle of Dogs, which is a prominent peninsula in East London surrounded on three sides by the River Thames. From the army's perspective, that's a place you could fence, patrol, and supply. But from the inside, if something goes wrong, you're closed off. The geography builds a dependency trap. By the time you arrive, food, power, information, medical screening, and permission to move all pass through the operation before they reach you. The people coming back are processed through intake, assigned housing inside District 1, and given identification and folded into a managed routine. During recovery, that routine feels like order can give you a false sense of security. But when the operation changes direction, all of it changes with it. The same setup that gets you fed, housed, and accounted for can also hold you in place once the military stops treating District 1 as a resettlement project. By the time you're getting there, the decisions have already been made for you. Where you sleep, where you eat, and where you're allowed to go. The first thing District 1 takes from you is the ability to leave, and it does this before the virus ever gets back in. Which means the first survival window doesn't come from choosing your way out of District 1. It comes from never being gathered into the repatriation system in the first place. In other words, it belongs to the people who are never collected and never processed back into the official recovery plan. And I know that staying outside the walls sounds insane when the alternative is food, water, working lights, and a bed inside the first functioning zone in London in the last 28 weeks. But outside the wire is the last place where your life hasn't fully been handed over to soldiers, checkpoints, and permission to move. And funny enough, all through my When You Had to Leave series, I've been preaching against moving blindly towards the military and quarantine zones. But to be fair, they didn't leave you much of a choice in this movie if they found you. That being said, intake is where uncertainty outside the fence gets traded for dependence inside of it. And once that trade has been made, your problems are just beginning. Now after intake, put yourself inside the system. Your room is several floors up in your apartment block. The lights are on and the food service is running inside the zone. Soldiers are visible enough to make the place feel safe, and from your window, the rest of London sits dark across the water while the security zone waits to expand. Inside that routine, the second outbreak doesn't feel like it's coming for you. Instead, it feels like normalcy might actually be returning. And yes, I see the outbreak and the outbreak comments, guys. I know you love to leave them. I can't help it, the Canadian just comes out on me when I say the word outbreak. Outbreak. Anyways, things start to unravel due to Tammy and Andy. They're two kids inside the safe zone who are bored, curious, and drawn towards their old home. So they slip out of the security area and make their way into an uncleared part of London. The kids end up finding their old house, where they encounter their mother Alice, who they thought to be dead. They were also followed by the army, which means Alice is taken back to District 1. This is the beginning of the end for everyone inside the wire, because Alice doesn't quite look like she's infected with the rage virus. She's coherent and not violently trying to attack anyone. Then the medical officer, Major Scarlet, screens her and finds the virus in her blood and saliva. The army then realizes she's infected, but they're looking at a carrier, not your typical rage infected. General Stone, the commander running District 1, immediately orders her to be killed. So what went wrong here? The problem is timing. The discovery happens after Alice has already been brought inside District 1. Behind the wire, inside the same managed system, civilians are trusting with their lives. And that's the invisible collapse. District 1 identifies Alice once Scarlet tests her, but the operation was not ready for someone who could appear normal long enough to get inside the zone and become the source of the second outbreak. At this point, the system has already failed. Civilians just don't know it yet. The transmission rules in 28 weeks later make the entire recovery system dangerous in a way most civilians inside District 1 would never anticipate. The zone is built around the assumption that the infected people look infected, but Alice proves someone can be a carrier of the rage virus, pass it through close contact, and still appear normal long enough to be brought in behind the wire. And once exposure happens, the infected person could turn in seconds, and a crowd has no useful window to react before danger is already moving through the room. That brings the movie to the breach that actually restarts the the outbreak. The character named Don, the two kids' dad, is not some random civilian who wanders into the wrong place at the wrong time. He's the district caretaker, the man who keeps the lights, water, and heat running inside District 1. He has access across buildings, and the access takes him right to Alice. At the start of the movie, Don and Alice were hiding in a cottage when the infected broke in, and Don escaped while Alice was left behind. So when he finds out she actually survived, guilt takes over. So Don decides to enter the isolation room, sees the wife he abandoned, and gets close enough for one emotional decision to bring the whole system to its knees. He kisses Alice, turns, kills her, and the infection is no longer held behind a door by a carrier. It is now loose inside the wire. This is the first structural failure the civilians can eventually feel. District 1 can fence the peninsula, but it still depends on people with credentials making the right call. The man responsible for keeping the zone functioning is also the man with enough access to bring the virus to the population center. And once the virus is loose inside District 1, the building becomes the first multiplier. The military response becomes the second, but that doesn't fully reveal itself until the alarm starts and Code Red begins. By the time everyone can see the threat clearly, the crowd is already blocking the corridor and the response outside is starting to close around them. Alright guys, real quick, I have a new channel. I know people are enjoying this format a lot and they want me to cover other movies, but I can't cover anything outside of the zombie genre, but I can do that on this channel here. So go and check it out, link will be in the pinned comment and description, and I already have a video uploaded there. Alright, back to it. If you've already gone through intake and accepted housing in District 1, the next useful window is much shorter. It opens before the sirens and before the crowd knows anything, well ahead of Code Red going fully active. No civilian gets a clean warning here. The movie doesn't give us a neat scene where the residents watch the military prepare before the alarm, so this window is partially inferred from how these operations work. If any warning existed before Code Red, it would have been easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. You'd have to watch for soldiers moving with more urgency, attention turning inward, and security tightening up around the perimeter. The warnings wouldn't tell you there's a carrier inside the building, but it does tell you that command has received information serious enough to move armed people before civilians have been alerted. So that would come down to recognizing the pattern. In conflict zones in real life, people often learn to watch posture before announcements because soldiers and checkpoints react before public messaging catches up. The lesson here is that if soldiers controlling your movement and safety start repositioning before they explain why, you might want to start asking questions or bracing yourself. Most civilians will miss this window because they have no reason to watch for it. They're in their rooms and the perimeter is supposed to be someone else's job. So when the alarm finally sounds, civilians do what the instructions say and move towards safe rooms and holding areas inside the building. And I hope this goes without saying, but if you find yourself in a situation with a fast-moving virus, you probably don't want to pack yourself into a tight space with a whole bunch of people, because all it takes is one infection to turn that room upside down. So anyone who caught wind of the soldiers repositioning as a warning worth acting on before Code Red turned into a lockdown, they would have ended up in a far better position than the people who decided to pack in together. So this window is a tiny gap between the military knowing something is wrong and the public being told what to do. Whether you catch it and listen to the military's instructions decides your fate here. Alright, so window 3, the alarm goes off and most civilians arrive at the same problem at once, which is getting out. The problem is everyone all funneling toward the same exits make a whole bunch of noise for the infected to hear. And where does everybody end up? In the garage, where the military starts locking people in to try and keep them safe. Unfortunately, that means you have a ton of frightened people packed into a sealed space with no reliable way to tell who's been exposed and no way out. And sure enough, Don reaches the crowd, and boy is he infected as fuck. The same containment system that failed to stop him in medical isolation now funnels him straight into a packed civilian holding area. And then the power cuts out. Faces disappear, movement becomes noise, and the distance between you and the nearest threat is something you're now trying to estimate in the dark. Packing people into a room with no escape was already a terrible idea during a fast-moving virus, and now the power going out was the final nail in the coffin. Code Red adds more danger, and it escalates in stages. The safe room fills first. The soldiers try to keep infected movement separated from civilian movement. Once the separation fractures, the perimeters take priority, because every civilian now represents a possible path for the rage virus to get out of the security zone. And that's where the mission changes. General Stone escalates Code Red to step 2, and gives the order to execute everyone. At that point, the military is no longer sorting civilians from infected, it's clearing the entire zone. Delta Force Sniper Doyle's rooftop position shows what that looks like. He starts off trying to target the infected. Then the crowd breaks apart, people scatter, and the difference between a running civilian and a freshly turned person stops being readable from from the rooftop with a rifle. For you, that means getting into open ground puts you in the sightline of people who've been pushed past careful identification and towards termination. Now, believe it or not, there's still a narrow window for you to escape during all of this, because the snipers, helicopters, vehicles, and soldiers are all moving into position, and for a few minutes, parts of the outer edge might still have gaps in it. So if you avoided the so-called safe rooms and stayed ahead of the first crowd, your next decision comes down to reaching the least covered edge before the patrol does. So if you're still trying to survive during Code Red, the answer isn't a heroic sprint towards the obvious exits. The people who have any chance are the ones who avoid the crowd early, stay out of the open plaza, and keep moving away from the places everyone else is being pushed toward. That doesn't guarantee escape, but it keeps you from joining the packed rooms and the exposed streets the movie shows people getting killed in. By the time this window closes, open movement is gone. The surface now belongs to the rage-infected, military sightlines, and orders that no longer separate you from the threat clearly enough to protect you. Code Red gives you a few ugly minutes where the position still matters. After that, escape stops being something the average civilian can plan for. Once the perimeter hardens, getting out won't be easy. The zone is completely locked down, and the soldiers are on high alert taking out anything that moves, and the only variable you can still control is how much attention you're drawing to yourself. Now, some people might wonder if hiding in your room instead of going to the safe rooms might have kept you out of the garage failure, and it would have, but it doesn't turn your apartment block into a survival base. It only delays the problem. The power is still unreliable, infected may already be moving through the building, and every supply run still forces you back into a zone built to contain whatever is left inside. Either way, you're still inside the district. The power going out doesn't help either. Stairwells that were lit are now dark openings, and the routes you recognized 20 minutes ago are no longer looking familiar, and every minute you spend reorienting yourself is a minute the next phase of Code Red is already running. And once the military loses control of the streets, surviving the next phase of Code Red is going to be a problem. Once the perimeter fails, the military's final answer is an air attack. The Isle of Dogs gets hit with incendiary fire because containment has become more important than anyone still trapped inside. So if you're still inside the target zone when it begins, you're finished. If you manage to scale the outer walls with Doyle and the others, then you're outside of the main striking area. But getting outside the main strike zone isn't the same as being safe. Most people would only make it this far because Doyle disobeys orders, abandons his sniper position, and gets them over the wall, and physically leads them through the next phase of the collapse. And once you're over the wall, things just keep getting worse. Doyle's friend Flynn is waiting with a helicopter, but he's not looking to rescue a small group of people. He's only there because Doyle reached out to him directly. Basically, without Doyle, you're shit out of luck. The only escape by air is tied to their relationship, not a public evacuation route that's owed to you. So, if you're an average civilian outside the wall, you don't have the luxury of somebody with a helicopter coming to bail you out. But lucky for the survivors, they do have Doyle, until they reach the car sequence. The vehicle stalls and the infected are closing in. So Doyle gets out and pushes the car while the others stay inside. But the infected aren't the only problem. The military clearing teams are moving through the streets with flamethrowers, burning anything left in the zone. And when I say anything, that means Doyle too. After losing Doyle, they escape to the underground, but the underground is not entirely safe either. Down here, they run into Dawn again. Scarlett keeps the kids moving, but she's killed before they all escape together, and Andy gets bit by Dawn. The only reason the bite doesn't end his story right there is because Andy inherited the same carrier trait from his mother. Again, this is a luxury most people wouldn't have. So, by the time they reach daylight again, this has stopped being anything a normal civilian could ever copy. The chain of events leading up to this are now Doyle breaking orders, Scarlett choosing the kids over the operation, Andy surviving a bite because of a rare carrier condition, and Flynn deciding to still take the kids even though Doyle didn't make it. The helicopter is the final escape window, but I'll keep on saying it. This wouldn't be an escape window for most people. The stars would really have to align for you to pull this off. By the end, survival in District 1 is decided before most people understand why they're choosing. The infected are the visible horror, but the deeper survival test is how quickly a civilian reads the zone and their own position inside of it. Once the rage virus returns, the US-led military operations' first priority is the perimeter and the world outside it. Under Code Red, every civilian becomes a potential carrier, a possible route for infection to leave the zone, and that's what makes running towards authority during the alarm one of the most dangerous instincts a person can follow. Physical position does the rest. Someone near the southern edge has choices that someone deep inside the residential blocks lose before they even hear the siren clearly. You can't fully control that once the outbreak starts, but you can influence it beforehand by paying attention to your floor, your exits, your perimeter routes, and how far you're sitting from the main crowd. So the best time to avoid District 1 was before the repatriation system absorbed you. Outside the wire, you still had movement, distance from the residential blocks, and some separation from the managed population centers. Obviously, I'm not saying you'd survive the second outbreak, quick, but you wouldn't have gotten swallowed up in the safe zone, or burnt up, whatever you want to call it. But for many people, this wasn't a real choice. After months outside, a lit building with food, beds, and the possibility of family inside would pull almost anyone forward, and anyone found by the military could be brought into the system rather than politely invited. So for anyone already inside, the pre-alarm window was the realistic chance to leave before becoming part of the containment problem. The visible warning was soldiers repositioning around the perimeter before civilians had any explanation for why. If you caught that and moved towards the edge of the zone, you might have gotten out before all hell broke loose. The code red window was your last chance. It gave you a narrow stretch of time before the perimeter reached full coverage, and it demanded choices most people would struggle to make, like leaving the crowd, avoiding the safe rooms, not listening to authorities, and moving towards the exit instead of the uniforms. After that, escape wasn't something a normal civilian could pull off on their own, not without a whole lot of luck at least. Tammy and Andy's escape proved how rough it really was. The only civilian exit that actually worked required outside help, the underground, and a helicopter. And like I said earlier, that's not a realistic scenario for pretty much everyone. What District 1 proves in this movie is that a safe zone can turn lethal by the flip of a switch. The fence lines were already containment lines, the residential blocks were concentrating the population, and the soldiers who made the zone feel safe were the same force that would prevent anyone from leaving once the mission objective changed. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and don't forget to check out the new channel. I really want to get that going, that'd be cool. And if you enjoyed this video and you like this format, I've got a playlist right here of a lot more just like it. Alright guys, catch you next time. Cheers.